The topic that we're going to cover today is CISSP modular training. And within this specific subset, we're going to look at the interesting topic of cryptography. Now, before I start, um, sorry, yeah. Before I start jumping into the actual topic and the core subject matter, I want to give you a very short introduction about the organization that is giving you this training. This is nothing but Ingram Micro. I want to give you a short introduction to my organization, which is Ingram Micro, and then a very quick overview about CISSP as well, the exam, the value that CISSP is going to bring to you in your career. I assume that you're planning to sit for the exam, hopefully within the year 2021, if not even sooner than this. Or maybe you already wrote the exam many years back and you're now looking to brush up on the concepts, just revisit the topics. So whichever your position you are in right now, I'm very happy that you have fixed your interest on this very respected subject, which is CISSP. And I'll give you a short overview about the exam, the subject of the topic of CISSP itself. And after these two sections, sections 1 and 2, we are then going to jump into our core topic, which is cryptography. So a very quick introduction to our organization, Ingram Micro. So maybe you're already familiar with us because well, Ingram Micro happens to be the largest technology distributor in the world. Even if you're not familiar, I'm very honored to let you know that any piece of technology that you are dealing with today, whether it has come from Microsoft, Dell, HP, Oracle, Cisco, or whoever it is, or even the smallest technology vendors you might not even have heard about, the small companies, there is a very high likelihood that the product that you're using, Ingram Micro had some part or the other to play with it. Because like I said, we're the largest technology distributor in the world, $50 billion+ company, 35,000 plus employees all over the world, and any sort of technology distribution or technology engagement happening all over the world, there's a very good chance we have a part to play in it. So it's a very huge organization, and here within the Middle East, we have a presence which is spanning over 30 plus years. We are known predominantly as Aptec Distribution here in the Middle East, and then Aptec became a part of Ingram Micro just a few years back, 5 to 6 years back. Now, the team that I'm representing is Ingram Micro's cybersecurity division. This is the solution or the center of excellence team based out of our office in Dubai, from where we are developing as well as delivering a lot of value added products as well as services. So when I say products, I'm talking about in-house developed products or tools that we have developed ourselves. You see the four tools over here: Discovery, Virtual Lab, as well as Cybergram and multi-vendor architecture. Apart from that, there are also multiple services that we give you, like consultancy services, ransomware response. If at all your customers have been, targeted in a cyber attack, we can definitely help you to investigate, find out the root cause, and even recover from these attacks. This comes in as part of our technical security services, as well as consultancy services. If you wish to comply with different standards, different regulations, PCI, ISO 27001, etc., we are the guys we can help you to do this. The most important part is the trainings, where we offer cybersecurity trainings. Like this particular training here is I would say it's a trailer of the actual training that we do, which is a CISSP training, the PCI DSS, ISO, and also GDPR related trainings. We happen to be an official training partner of the IAPP here in the Middle East. So any of these areas in cybersecurity where you need a hand, please reach out to me directly or to the team. I'm going to leave the contacts of the team in the chat as well. So if at all you have any requirements, or your end customers, your partners, etc., they have any cybersecurity requirements, we are the guys who can definitely support you on your requirements. Okay, so this is the the overall portfolio of services I was telling you about. We have trainings, we have consultancies, as well as we have technology driven solutions across pretty much any major vendor that you can think of. And these are the vendors focusing only in cybersecurity solutions all over the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa region. Right. Now, with the introduction having been done, let me start explaining to you a little bit about CISSP. Now, maybe you have already, started preparing for the exam. If I assume you're planning to sit the exam very soon. or you are still thinking about starting the journey of your CISSP. Whichever seat you are in, whichever position you are in, first of all, please accept my congratulations because you have decided to take a very, very important step in your cybersecurity, information security career, which is to upskill yourself on the CISSP in regard to the CISSP certification. This is a very, very commendable decision because you already know this very well. CISSP happens to be the most respected information security certification in the world. So any person who is working in cybersecurity, in the space of cybersecurity, this certification is something that they are expected to have. And I know the exam is extremely difficult. The volume of the material that we have to cover, the so-called common body of knowledge, the CISSP CBK, it is extremely voluminous, but it is not difficult. That's one thing I can definitely assure you of. It is not difficult. If you're going to prepare for this, all you need to do is make sure that you are consistent. Like, I'm going to study 1 hour a day, maybe 2 hours, or just half an hour a day, but I need to make sure that I put in that 1 hour every single day. And maybe I'll complete this within 6 months or 3 months. But whichever strategy works for you, I can tell you this, the syllabus is huge, but it is not difficult. That's the reason we are offering these modular trainings like this one that I'm giving you right now on the topic of cryptography. So what am I hoping to achieve through this training? I will explain all this as we go down the slides. Okay. Now, what does CISSP do? It validates an information security professionals, both technical as well as managerial knowledge in relation to information security management within an organization. So it's a 3-hour exam, and you can theoretically you can complete the exam within just about 100 questions. Okay, so three hours, and then you can complete the exam within as many as 100 questions. The way in which the questions are graded is on the basis of your answers. I mean, there is an algorithm, which is what we call the CAT, computer aided testing, that CISSP is running. If you're going to give too many correct answers according to your responses, the difficulty level of the next question is going to be altered. So there is an algorithm which decides this. By the way in which the algorithm works, this is proprietary to ISC Square. So I wouldn't be able to explain it to you because I'm not from ISC Square myself. Okay. Apart from that, if the answers that you're giving happen to be wrong, you're leaning more on the the wronger side of things. According to that, also the questions get modulated. The next questions will get modulated. So if, for example, my first 10 questions, all of them I've answered correctly, the algorithm is then going to modulate the questions. And then by the time it reaches a 100th question, it knows for sure this person has sufficient knowledge on all the required domains of CISSP. So we can give him a passing score, him or her. If not, it'll continue to, modulate the difficulties of the questions until finally we have reached the end of the exam, which will be either in 3 hours or in 150 questions. Okay. The passing grade that we need to acquire, we need to get 700 points out of a total of 1000 potential points. So it's around 70%, as we can put it this way. Okay. When I mentioned something about domains, I just briefly used the word domains, and I also said common body of knowledge in CISSP. What do I mean by this? This slide explains this in a very, very simple way. These 8 points that you see here, these 8 points constitute the overall syllabus of CISSP. Each of these is a domain within CISSP: software development security, security operations, so on and so forth. By the time you complete studying all of these domains, you can say for a fact that you know something about everything in the field of information security. Okay, that's the reason we say when you have completed your CISSP exam, you are considered to be a master of the whole field of information security. But you're not a specialist. You know something about everything that happens in information security, but I can't say that you're a specialist in one particular field. For that is where we'll have to go to the more specialized certifications. Like, for example, if you want to specialize in pen testing, we have OSCP. You want to specialize in auditing part, which again is covered here in CISSP, you'll have to go for CISA from ISACA. Or you want to go for risk management, we have the C-risk from ISACA, and so on. CISSP is the golden certification that we are expected to have when we are specializing or building our careers in information security. Now, what about certification requirements? You have passed the exam. That is the biggest barrier that we have to cross, and this you have completed successfully. That is a great achievement. What next do we need to do? After we have passed the exam, we need to ensure that we are maintaining CPE points. So ISC Square has a specific requirement. Every 3 years, we need to maintain 120 CPE points. Okay, so 120 points, which we need to distribute over 3 years. So it is recommended, split it like 40 points every year. So 40, 40, 40, and you should be comfortable. Very often, I can tell you from experience, we tend to, push it towards the second or the third years, and then we tend to struggle a little bit to meet that 120 points in 3 years, that kind of requirements. Okay. Apart from that, once you pass the exam, you're also expected to demonstrate that you have work experience in at least two of those 8 CISSP domains. So you need to have 5 years of work experience. Of course, with the college degrees, we can try to get 1 year waived off from this requirement. So the 5 years will immediately become a 4 year requirement. If we still don't have that 5 years or 4 years work experience, we can continue to work towards achieving this experience within 6 years. So we are given 6 years timeline within which we'll have to acquire 4 years of experience or 5 years of experience, depending upon our degree, college degree. And until this time that we acquire this experience, we'll have to maintain the status of associate of ISC Square, as you see mentioned over here. So to explain this very quickly, if you pass the exam this year in 2021, and hypothetically you have only let's say 2 years of experience in information security in these domains from CISSP. So what you have now is you have 6 more years from today. So 2021 till 2027. During these 6 years, you are expected to achieve the balance 3 years of work experience. So that's the way in which it will work. So during the next 6 years, as long as you're acquiring that work experience requirement from ISC Square, you can apply for your certification, and you will also have to get an endorsement from an existing CISSP in good standing. Once these things check out, your certificate will be sent over to you, and trust me, it's a very, very amazing feeling when you receive the certification. Okay. Now let's talk about what are the expectations, what are the objectives of this particular training, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first of all, let me also mention, let's try to make this an interactive session. Unfortunately, I can't see you because we are in a virtual room, but let's at least make maximum use of the facilities that Microsoft Teams is giving us. So let's make it as interactive as possible. Any questions you have, any comments, any objections, even corrections if you have, please feel free. Just unmute yourself and start speaking, and we'll make it a discussion right there itself. But that being said, we know we have limitations of time. So we have only 1 hour, and it's already 2:15, within which I'm trying to cover this very, very important, very, very critical module, which is what we call cryptography. Are you ready to sit the exam after this training? Absolutely not. This training is not going to make you ready to even sit for a cryptography test. It is going to introduce you to the module of cryptography. It is going to explain to you what are the different topics that you're going to cover as part of cryptography. What I will request you to do is, after this training today, maybe in the evening or at night, whenever you get a few minutes time, if you have the CISSP CISSP textbook, please open it, go through the cryptography chapter and read it. You will be able to relate to the points that we are discussing today. Maybe you can come back to the recording and try to, backtrack, try to map the points as well. But this training, when you build on top of it with the textbook reading that I'm requesting you to do, yes, then you will be in a very good position. You can even take some sample tests, sample exams. You can actually have a good chance of getting a very good score from this cryptography module when you do these sample tests. But you will have to supplement the training with additional reading. This is my request to you. Okay. All right. Now let's start the main topic for today, which is cryptography. What really is cryptography? What do I mean by cryptography? This is the idea for this particular module. Now, ladies and gentlemen, cryptography is a field which has been in existence for decades, for centuries, in fact. What is the whole idea of cryptography? Cryptography is a study of a field where two individuals, two entities are able to talk to each other in the presence of others without the other people understanding what they are saying. So in the most basic form, two people are speaking in a language which to the people around them, they don't understand what this language is. You can say this is a simple form of a very, very high level form of cryptography. I don't understand what these two people are speaking. So I know they're talking, but I don't know what they're talking about. The same concept is what we are seeking to achieve in cryptography. Two individuals are able to share messages, exchange messages with each other in a fashion which, when the messages are intercepted by other individuals, which can be friendly individuals, they can be hostile individuals, they're not able to make any sense out of this. This simple concept is what this important module is all about. Now, how does this work? Cryptography has several elements or fundamental building blocks. What are these building blocks? What are these elements? We are going to look at them. At a very high level, you can put it this way. We have plain text, which is a message that anybody can understand. For example, a sentence that says, the earth is round. This is the plain text. It has to be passed through some sort of encryption mechanism. What do I mean by encryption mechanism? All of this I'm going to explain to you. And the output is the encrypted version of this plain text, which is what we call the ciphertext. The idea is that the intended recipients of this cipher, of this plain text message, if I can just pull my pointer, I'll be able to highlight better. Yeah. So the intended recipients who are probably sitting at this end, this is person B and this is person A. This person B is the recipient of this plain text. So B would have the necessary tools to take this ciphertext and decrypt it to come to the same plain text over here. What do I mean by these necessary tools? You already know this. It's the password, for example, that we use. I simply password protect a file and I send it over to you. Ideally, you should be the only person who has that password. So you can decrypt my file and you can read what I'm trying to say. Right now, this is the whole subject at a very, very high level. Now let's try to drill deeper into the building blocks and the building components of cryptography itself. What am I trying to achieve when I'm implementing cryptography? What are the objectives, first of all, in terms of cryptography? Firstly, I want to ensure confidentiality. I'm sending you a message. It is a secret message. I want only you to be enabled to read my message. So I am password protecting my file. Okay, obviously this is a very common example, very common objective of cryptography, and we are all very, very familiar with this from our day-to-day official activities and work that we do. We know we password protect files, but this also happens more commonly from the military perspectives, and this military perspective is something that you will see in your CISSP textbook. This is a recurring theme throughout the textbook. You'll see a lot of areas where information security and how it is implemented from the military perspective, like for example, data classification, asset valuation, and also here in terms of cryptography, how cryptography is helping military communications to ensure that they're kept secret and they are not decoded by the enemy forces of a particular defense unit, let's say. Okay. The other objective of cryptography, and this is probably something which we are not so familiar with, is integrity. Now, what do I mean by integrity? Suppose I am a criminal and I'm just giving a hypothetical scenario. I'm by no way close to what I'm just telling you right now, just, in a lighter note. A criminal has broken into a bank's ATM machine. Okay. Now, this individual has been recorded on the CCTV camera. What is important for the security professional is to ensure that this criminal does not have the ability to delete the recordings of that CCTV camera, because the moment he or she is able to do that, then the investigation is going to collapse, because we don't even have those CCTV camera recordings and we don't know how now we can solve this case of who broke into the bank's ATM machine. For a security professional, his objective is to ensure the recordings are maintained without any likelihood of being deleted. The CCTV camera recordings cannot be deleted, they cannot be modified, they cannot be corrupted in any fashion. That is what he is trying to achieve through integrity. Integrity ensures that a file or a file transmission can never be changed. It can, if at all it has to be changed, it is only done by authorized entities. Maybe the IT department, they are making some changes and it's been approved that these files can be deleted, for example. So that is the whole identity of integrity. When I'm sending you a file, I need to ensure that you are receiving the file in the same way that I send it. There's been no changes, there's been no unauthorized modifications. Cryptography is going to help us to achieve this. How? We are going to learn about that today. But the keyword I will tell you, it is hashing. Maybe you already know about hashing, but we are going to explore that today. The next example, the next objective is non-repudiation. What do I mean by non-repudiation? I'm going to be unable to deny the fact that I am the one who carried out a particular action. That is what non-repudiation. It is one of the objectives from an information security perspective. Cryptography is going to help us to achieve this. What do I mean by this? Suppose I sent you a file. I need to ensure that you are the intended recipient of the file. I need to ensure I'm not sending it to somebody else by mistake. And for this, I will ask you, can you please prove your identity? Similarly, tomorrow you also want to ensure that I'm not able to deny the fact that I sent you that file, which means I should also be able to prove my identity. So before sending the file, you can check this is Praveen who is sending you the file. And also I can check, are you my intended recipient of my file? That is what non-repudiation is. And that is where cryptography is helping us to achieve non-repudiation. And how does this work? We're going to learn about this as well today when we look at public key cryptography. Sorry, public key infrastructure, or so-called PKI. Okay. Now, there are some building blocks or fundamental elements of cryptography that I need to explain to you, and that's what we're going to start with in this particular slide. The first one is the encryption algorithm itself, or so-called cipher. Now, you already know about different encryption algorithms, like for example, AES 128 bits and so on. What are these encryption algorithms? This encryption algorithm is nothing but a mathematical function which explains, which contains a rule, which defines a rule, a system or a mechanism through which data is going to be encrypted. What this means is when you give it the input, when you give an input value to it, which is nothing but the plain text, the algorithm is always going to work on it in the same way. It is going to work on this input in the same way. And accordingly, it is going to come out with a ciphertext, which is your encrypted version of this particular text. Algorithms have become increasingly complex and extremely robust, extremely strong over the last few decades, and this is thanks to advances in the domains in the field of cryptography. There is a heavy element of mathematical analysis involved in developing these cryptographic algorithms, and yes, there's been a lot of development in this particular field of cryptography over the past many decades. Today we have sufficiently strong as well as easily implemented cryptographic algorithms or encryption algorithms, so-called ciphers, and these are implemented through software tools, which we'll talk about as we go down the slides. Okay, now one thing I need to mention, the algorithm is always public. It is a key that has to be kept secret. I'll talk about this as we go down the slides. The algorithm is always going to be accompanied with a key. Without the key, the algorithm may or may not be able to work. Okay. Why did I say may or may not be? It depends on what kind of encryption we are doing. Is it hashing or is it symmetric or asymmetric encryption? We'll talk about this as we go down. But the algorithm always needs a piece of a key which is going to encode or decode or encrypt or decrypt the input that is given to this particular algorithm. The best way to understand this is you have the regular, we all know about this regular padlock or the lock that we use to lock the doors, to lock the gates, and so on. Anybody can actually break open the lock and analyze and find out how this particular lock works, right? So the way in which this lock works, that is the algorithm or the cipher. But the key is going to be unique for every lock. Only the person who knows the key for a particular lock, only that person can actually break open the lock. That is the whole idea of locks and keys. And the same concept is what we are looking at over here in cryptography as well. The algorithm is nothing but the lock, which we saw on the previous slide. These encryption algorithms or ciphers, the way in which they work is published. It's made published information. It's made public information, and basically it's about how a lock works. But what has to be kept secret is this key, which is going to encrypt, which is going to accompany this particular lock at all points of time, this particular cipher at all points of time. Without the key, there is no way, there's theoretically no way that a cyber criminal would be able to decrypt an algorithm. But am I right in saying this? Not exactly. There are ways, but the problem is it's going to take time, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. Okay. Now, another building block of a cryptographic system that I need to explain is something called a crypto system. What is a crypto system? The collection of hardware or software that is used to implement the entire cryptographic process is what we call a crypto system. So it may be a mechanical system, it may be an application, it can be of any format. But basically, the entire ecosystem of elements that go into implementing a cryptographic process is what we call a crypto system. So the encryption algorithm that I mentioned earlier, the cipher, so to speak, would be implemented by the crypto system. Now, some definitions that I need to explain to you. Cryptanalysis is a study of crypto systems with the intent of cracking them. So, for example, there's an encryption algorithm like let's say AES, asymmetric, which is an encryption algorithm. Cyber criminals are working on methodologies to decrypt or to break these AES encryption algorithms without having the key. What is their objective in so doing? To be able to prove that these algorithms can actually be cracked. Not only cyber criminals, but also cryptologists themselves are also analyzing how they can break into encryption algorithms without the key. This study of analysis of cryptographic algorithms with the intent of cracking them without the key is what we call cryptanalysis. Now, how much time would they need to break an algorithm without the key being present with them? That is what we call the work factor. The stronger the algorithm, the higher the work factor is going to be. Okay, so if the algorithm is stronger with a larger key, that is also well and good. We will see this as we go down. Our objective is to ensure that this work factor, that is the time that a cyber criminal is going to take to crack an algorithm, this has to be maximum. This has to be as high as possible, such that it is not possible or it is just not worth it for a cyber criminal to spend time on cracking our algorithms and decrypting the files illegally. One of the most famous crypto systems in the world is the Enigma machine, which is pictured over here. This is a German crypto system, which again was developed by the Germans and was instrumental in enabling their military communications during World War II. The breaking or the decryption of this particular crypto system, which is the Enigma machine, was made possible by one man who is considered to be the father of modern computer science. This is no one but Mr. Alan Turing. When you find time, please read about him, because when he was able to decrypt the encryption algorithms of the Enigma machine and identify the secret messages that the Germans were sharing with their supporters during the World War II, he was able to support his government, namely the British government as well as the US government, to ambush the German military forces, and eventually this changed the entire course of World War II. This is a very interesting story. If you find time, please read up about it. Or if you're more into movies, there is a movie about this called The Imitation Game, where Mr. Benedict Cumberbatch is playing the role of Alan Turing. I think the movie is out there on Netflix as well. You can definitely try to watch it when you find some time. The Imitation Game. One more domain of cryptography that I want to explain to you, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call steganography. What do I mean by steganography? Now, in all of the examples that I mentioned in the past few slides, the sender and the recipient, they want to communicate with each other in a way that nobody else knows what they are saying. But what if we want nobody to even know that they are even talking to each other? I want to send a message to somebody else, but I don't want other people to even know that I'm talking to them. That is what steganography will help us to achieve. In encryption, unintended recipients, they know the data exists. They know that there is plain text. It's just that they can't decrypt it. They can't find out what is written on this and what is the plain text actually, because they don't have the key with them. But in steganography, they are blind to the fact that the data even exists. We don't even know that the data exists. How do we do this? There are many ways of implementing steganographic techniques. Okay, but one of the very common methods is what I'll just describe to you right now. I will send you a picture, which may be, let's say, a picture of two dice, like you see over here. This picture is what we call the Wessel image. Now, within this picture, as you know very well, any picture consists of pixels. You can open this picture using Microsoft Paint and try to zoom deep inside. You'll be able to see the individual pixels with different colors that go into making up this overall picture. Now, what if I were to send you this picture and I don't even encrypt it, I don't apply any sort of password protection on it. Other people can also see this picture and they think, yes, Mr. Praveen is just sending you a simple picture of two dice. But secretly, what I've done is I've sent you another key which has details of which pixels in this picture you need to focus on. When you have that particular key, you will be able to isolate specific pixels within this image. And like I said, when you zoom into the picture, you know they're already made up of pixels, right? You will be able to isolate those specific pixels and in a specific pattern. My message is going to be encoded within those pixels, those specific pixels that you need to focus on. That encoding and which pixels to choose, that is the key that I will have to share with you. Okay. How do I share keys securely with you without other people knowing about this? This is a topic that we'll talk about in symmetric key cryptography. It's a challenge. It is a challenge. It is overcome through through asymmetric key cryptography, and we'll talk about this in one of the upcoming slides. So the idea of steganography, like I just said, other people don't even know that the information exists. And one of the ways in which we can implement this is through these encoding of messages within images through secret codes. Okay. Couple of other building blocks that I need to explain to you, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call substitution right here, or confusion, and transposition or diffusion. Okay, these are building blocks that go into into implementing very, very complex encryption algorithms and ciphers. What do I mean by substitution? Very simple stuff. Your plain text is the word bottle that you see over here. To add confusion to this plain text, what I'll do is I'll just add a simple message +3. So B plus 3 is B, then there's C, D, and then there's E. So it becomes E. O plus 3 will become P, Q, and R. T plus 3 is going to become W. Again, W. And finally, L plus 3 is going to be O. E plus 3 is going to be H. Okay. So in this way, I can specify 3, I can specify 5, 20, all the way up to the end and the number of alphabets that we have, right? So what is the objective of substitution or so-called confusion? Of course, this is not a strong way of encrypting text, but when you combine it with other algorithms, it is going to increase the work factor exponentially. You remember the work factor is the time that is going to take to decrypt my encryption algorithms without the key. It is going to increase that exponentially. So this substitution is going to be one of the steps that we will do when we implement bigger encryption algorithms. Another step that we can carry out is what we call transposition or diffusion. In diffusion, what I do is, instead of having the +3 key that we had in the previous slide, I will have a bunch of different values through which the addition has to be carried out. So these different values are the ones that you see over here, the transposition rule, so to speak. Okay. So the rule here is 542613. Now what I'm doing here is I'm simply going to jumble my values of the different letters of the plain text. So since the key here is 542613, the output is going to be starting with the fifth letter. The fifth letter is L. The fourth letter is T. So I have L and I have T. The second letter is O. So O is here. The sixth letter is E. And the first letter is B and the last letter is T. Now these seem to be very, very basic stuff. But when you think about it, when you couple them with the more complex encryption algorithms that we're going to talk about, they're going to make them all the more stronger, all the more effective in carrying out their intended objectives. Okay, so transposition or diffusion as well as substitution or confusion. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's be very clear on these topics, because these are going to be, you will definitely find these in your textbook, and you could definitely find them combined within other questions, a part of a bigger question within your CISSP exam. Okay. A little bit about evolution of ciphers, ladies and gentlemen. I told you that a cipher is the encryption algorithm that determines how the plain text is going to be encrypted into the ciphertext. Now, in the early days, ciphers were usually done using simple manual methods. For example, in ancient Sparta, transposition ciphers were used as below. Okay, now this is an example of a transposition cipher. What have I got over here? First of all, let me remind you, I'm talking about ancient Sparta. I mean, this is like pre, the BC days, more than 2,000, 3,000 years back. And this is a time when people were not expected to be able to read or write. Okay, it's only the more privileged members of society, so to speak, maybe members of royal families and so on, who are able to read and write back during this particular time. So I'm talking about pre, the BC days and so on. Now, during this time, suppose one of the sender wanted to send a message to the recipient, but they didn't want anybody in the middle to be able to read what the message was. What they would do was they would take a simple cylinder, which you see over here, and they'll wrap a strip of cloth around this particular cylinder, and once it's wrapped around it, they will write the message. The message here is send help, as you can see in this particular example. What they do is they will remove the wrap after this and then send this particular strip of paper over to the recipient. Now, when you remove it, of course, it's going to look like this, SEELND, and so on and so forth. Not everyone remember, ladies and gentlemen, not everyone knows to read and write in this particular era. So most of them would not be able to, make any sense out of these letters. In this particular example, what is the cipher? The cipher is the algorithm, remember that. So the cipher or the algorithm is a methodology of wrapping this particular piece of cloth around a cylinder. That is a simple algorithm. That's how it works. What is the key? The key is the length and the thickness of this particular cylinder, ladies and gentlemen. That is the key, and that key has to be shared secretly over to the intended recipient, because if somebody else gets hands on the cylinder with the same length and thickness, they would also be able to wrap this particular strip around it, and they would be able to decrypt the message. So the idea was to keep the details of this particular cylinder secret, and probably send the cylinder itself, or at least the dimensions of the cylinder, separately as a key to the intended recipient. So that was the early manual ciphers. I would love to dwell further on this, but we don't have time. So moving on to the next one, followed by the mechanical era, where we had the age of the industrial age, where we had mechanical massive strides in the field of mechanical engineering. And this is when we had mechanical ciphers, the best example of which was the Enigma machine that I just told you about on the previous slides. With the advent of computing, software-based ciphers also came into existence. And today, these are the most common forms of encryption implementation mechanisms, which are nothing but programs, computer programs, which will help us to encrypt and decrypt text. The most common example that we have is WinZip and WinRAR, that you and I, we use it on a day-to-day basis. One of the most popular ways of implementing cryptography using software. What about the future? The future, it looks like we are going to be leaning towards quantum cryptography, ladies and gentlemen. What do I mean? What do I mean by quantum physics? Quantum physics is a completely new field altogether, and it focuses on the ability of particles called quantum particles to exist in multiple forms at the same time. So it'll have multiple states of existence at the same point of time. This ability for these particles to have so-called quasi-states of existence, this is going to increase the capability for processors to store and process data. What do I mean by this? In today's processors, as we know this, we have binary processing mechanisms where data is represented either as a 0 or a 1. With a quantum particle, a single particle at a given point of time will have multiple states of existence, more than just 0 and 1. Okay, so it can be 0, 0, 1, it can be 0, 1, 0, and so on and so forth. Please excuse my poor writing, but you get the idea. 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, and so on. Okay, so one particle will have 3 states of existence, more, and n number of particles will have exponentially that many more states of existence at a given point of time. So quantum computers are expected to be exponentially faster than even the fastest computers that we have today. And that field of computing is what is expected to drive stronger cryptographic algorithms, which will take light years, hypothetically speaking, to decrypt without the key. Okay, now couple more concepts that we need to understand is what we call stream ciphers and block ciphers. Okay, on 2 slides these are coming up. What is a stream cipher? A stream cipher is a very fast way of encrypting text. Very simple stuff. You have the plain text, which is, for example, a message that says the earth is round. We have something called a key stream generator. What does a key stream generator do? It generates a random series of ones and zeros, okay? The input text is now going to be XORed, XOR. What do I mean by XOR? I'll come to this. The input text is now going to be XORed with the key stream. The plain text is going to be XORed with the key stream, one bit at a time, right? Now, what is very important is the ciphertext is going to be the same length as the plain text itself. This means that if there is any input, if there is any repetitive words in the input, like for example, my initial statement was the earth is round, okay? Now, if my next message is going to be the world is big, okay? You see the word THE. If you can see my screen, I think you can't see my screen. I'll just type it into the chat. I'll just share my screen again. So my first message was the earth is round. And the second message is the world is big. Okay, I believe you can see my screen fully now. So you see the word THE, the and the. This message, this word is recurring, it is repetitive. You're going to get the same ciphertext for both these words, THE. So there's going to be some sort of repetition in the output. This repetition is going to make it easier for cyber criminals to reverse engineer my input. That's the reason we are including this key stream generator. What the key stream generator does is, it is going to come out with a random series. It has to be extremely random, as I've written over here, random series of ones and zeros. The plain text and the key stream and the key stream, basically, they are going to be XORed. XOR is a mathematical function focusing on binary algorithms. You remember binary mathematics? Maybe we studied about this in school, you might be remembering. In binary mathematics, we have different functions like OR, XOR, and so on and so forth. What we do here is, in an XOR function, we have two inputs, A and B, both of them are going to be XORed. If both the bits are the same, the output is going to be 0. So here you see both the bits are the same, the output is going to be 0. If both the bits are different, the output is going to be 1, as you see over here. So that's the whole way in which XOR works. So in order to introduce that randomness into the input and to make it more difficult for the cyber criminals or whoever to decrypt the text without the key, we are going to XOR the input, the plain text, with this random key stream. Okay, the ones and zeros that you see over here. The ciphertext will eventually have the same length as the plain text, nevertheless. This length is going to be the same between the input and the output itself. Another kind of cipher is block cipher. Now, what does block cipher do? The block cipher, it breaks the data into multiple blocks. So you see my plain text here is the earth is round. It's going to be broken down into 4 blocks. The first block has the word the, then we have earth, and then is round. It is a little more secure than stream encryption or stream ciphers, but it takes more time because it's going to break the data into blocks and then it is going to encrypt them with the keys. Okay, now here's the best part. We will also apply confusion and diffusion to the input text in order to make it more random and in order to make it more complex. If you remember confusion, diffusion, we spoke about this on the previous 2 slides. Confusion is where we add +3. Diffusion is where we simply have a transposition rule and then we reorganize or we jumble the letters of the plain text. So this is where you're going to combine confusion and diffusion with other more larger forms of cryptography. Here in block ciphers, you can have multiple rounds, 4 to 32 rounds of confusion and diffusion in order to complicate or make it more difficult to reverse engineer the entire algorithm. Also, we do something called chaining, which means once you pass the first block through the encryption, that particular output is going to become the input for the next block. You can, for example, XOR it with the next block, which is the word earth over here. You XOR it and then you come out with an output and then you pass that through the cipher. So chaining, where the results from one cipher will become the input to the next block. This is also a recommended methodology in order to prevent identical clear text from being encrypted into identical ciphertext, which is where people will not be able to identify what the input is simply by looking at repetitive patterns in the output. Okay. Now, why am I saying all this? Why are these important? You definitely would have guessed it. But when I discuss different kinds of cyber attacks, cryptographic attacks, we will see how cyber criminals are able to reverse engineer these algorithms, and why it's important that we use these concepts of, confusion, diffusion, chaining, etc., to make it more difficult for them to reverse engineer the algorithms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all these different algorithms, there are different ciphers or different encryption algorithms. None of them is 100% effective. We know this very well. Our intention is to make it as difficult as possible for a criminal to crack these algorithms. It is not possible to make it 100% effective such that no criminal can crack it. We've still not reached that. Even the best cryptographic algorithms have been cracked. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time before the computers or device which can actually generate and predict the keys of these particular ciphers. For example, the DES cracker machine was developed by the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, which was able to crack DES algorithms in just 4.5 days. What is DES? We'll talk about this as we go down the slides. One of the most popular forms of symmetric key cryptography, ladies and gentlemen, DES. There are different DES modes. We'll learn about this in your textbook, and I'm going to explain this as well today. Also, WEP. WEP is a protocol that is used to encrypt wireless transmissions. For example, tomorrow, if you're walking into a coffee shop, of course, once we are past the whole COVID situation and all this, although granted we are doing a lot better in the UAE compared to other parts of the world, absolutely. So assume that you are sitting in a coffee shop and you decide to connect to the Wi-Fi in this particular coffee shop. If the Wi-Fi network that you're connected to, you're able to drill in and see what kind of protocols it's using for security. If you see that it is using WEP encryption, please, if possible, disconnect from it, or simply don't visit any website which requires you to type a password, which means don't connect to your internet banking website. Don't open your Gmail, your office mail, or anything where you need to type in a password, because this password can easily be cracked within few seconds by anybody who is listening in to the traffic that is flowing on this Wi-Fi network. If it is using WEP encryption. WEP encryption is extremely easy and can be broken within a matter of seconds or minutes for that matter. We have to use at least WPA2 with pre-shared key. WPA2 PSK, this is what is recommended.
Rahul, and if you question, please.
Yes, sir, please.
Just regarding that, your example with Gmail and WEP as a weak algorithm, actually cryptographic algorithm. If we access to Gmail or any other bank site which use TLS, our password should still be encrypted, right?
If it uses SSL or yes, like you said, TLS, absolutely yes. The password would still be encrypted, yes.
Okay.
100%. Yes, thank you, sir. And we are going to talk about this when we jump into the last module for today, which is public key infrastructure, PKI, where we'll look at certificate authorities, SSL, TLS, which is nothing but SSH on top of HTTP to bring about HTTPS protocols through which you can encrypt your traffic as it is flowing over the internet. We'll talk about all of these protocols as we go down today. Thank you, sir. Also, we noted that RSA was also successfully broken by carrying out something called a side channel attack. What is a side channel attack? A side channel attack focuses on the environment around which an encrypting system is actually working. It doesn't focus on the algorithm itself, rather the environment within which it is working. So what do I mean by this? There may be certain variations, acoustic variations. There may be certain electric inferences or signals which are being generated by the crypto system when it is carrying out the encryption process itself. By listening into these micro vibrations or detecting these micro electrical signals, it has been proven that it is possible to crack specific algorithms, like in the case of RSA, which was also successfully cracked by carrying out a side channel attack. Okay, perfect. Now, when you are trying to crack a cryptographic algorithm, ladies and gentlemen, there are several situations that you will find yourself in. Those situations are what I have tried to summarize here on this simple table over here. The first situation is what we call ciphertext only. So in the ciphertext only, what is available to me? I have the encrypted text. I have the cipher, and I also have the encrypted text, which is a ciphertext. My objective is to find out what is that plain text message, what is that message that was being sent. So the ciphertext is available. I want to find out the plain text, and most importantly, I want to find out the key. Okay. The other possibility is you have some portion of the plain text. The plain text is partly available, known plain text. I want to find out the key, and I want to find out the complete plain text. Of course, I have the cipher and I also have the encrypted text. Yet another two other possibilities. You have chosen plain text and chosen ciphertext. Again, in both of these, you're trying to determine what is a key. The cipher is available to you. The ciphertext is available to you in this particular option, and it is partly available to you in chosen ciphertext. But the plain text is not available in chosen ciphertext, just like how we saw it over here. You're trying to determine what the plain text is. And the plain text is only partly available in chosen plain text. So you have a chosen portion of the plain text available to you. So to summarize and repeat this once again, in all the different situations, you don't have the key. Okay, that's one thing that is common across all the different situations. You need to determine what is the key. Okay, now your cipher is always going to be available because, like we said earlier, the cipher has to be public. Anybody should be able to access and analyze it and even try to crack it. That's where the strength of the cipher is. Our situations are going to vary between availability of plain text and ciphertext. In ciphertext only, I have the ciphertext available to me. In known plain text, again, I have the ciphertext, but I have a portion of the plain text. Okay, but I need to determine what is the rest of the plain text. If I don't have any plain text at all available to me, then I'm here in the ciphertext only mode where I don't have any plain text available to me. The other two situations are chosen plain text and chosen ciphertext, where again, the plain text is either completely not available or it's only partly available to you. And the ciphertext, again, it's either fully available or only a portion of it is available to you for analysis. Okay, so these are the different situations, and on the basis of these situations, we'll have to try and crack these different encryption algorithms. Okay, now what are the different attacks that cyber criminals launch against different organizations, ladies and gentlemen, when they're trying to crack, for example, passwords and so on? Now, this list by no means is exhaustive because, like I said, this training is going to introduce you to the topics. When you read the section in your textbook, you're going to see a lot more examples of attacks. But let me focus on the top three that we see over here. The first one is called the birthday attack. What do I mean by a birthday attack? Assume a situation where you are filling a room with n number of people. Of course, with COVID-19 now, this is not recommended. So let's say that you're filling these people into a virtual room, let's say a Microsoft Teams meeting. Now, when you have so many people in this room, you're trying to solve a simple question. What is the possibility or probability that at least one person in this room has the same birthday as me? That is the question I'm trying to answer myself. At least one person in this room should have the same birthday as me. Mathematically, it has been proven that in order to get at least one person to have the same birthday as me, I'll have to fill the room with at least 253 people. That is a number that has been derived. An easier question to ask ourselves is, how do I fill the room such that at least two people have the same birthday? That is an easier question. Instead of asking who's going to have my birthday, I'm going to ask a question, how can I have any two people sharing a birthday? When you do this, you'll see that the number will come down drastically. It will become just 10% of the original number. So earlier it was 253 people that you needed. Now you just need 23 people. When you fill in a room with 23 people, probabilistically speaking, you have the highest possibility or probability of saying you have at least two people who have the same birthday. This property is a mathematical paradox, okay? And this paradox is what is going to be exploited in this birthday attack. What we're trying to do here is we're going to take advantage of a probability that different inputs are going to produce the same encrypted output. So let it just sink into our minds. Whether you're going to encrypt the word Praveen or you're going to encrypt the word computer, what is the probability that you're going to get the same output? This probability is what the attacker is going to keep on exploiting in this birthday attack. Now, where will this attack come into use for a cyber criminal? Let me give you the example. Let me give you the scenario so you'll understand it very well. Suppose a manager for a company within a company has submitted the performance appraisal report for the person reporting to him. And the final outcome of this report is this person is not meeting the expectations. And this is the final grade that has been given to the person. Now, this final report, cryptographically speaking, it has been hashed. What do I mean by hashing? Let me take you to the very first slide where I said something about integrity. This slide, I told you something about integrity, and I told you the keyword is going to be hashing. Now is the time to tell you about hashing. Hashing is a mathematical function which will ensure that once a file has passed through a particular input, a particular function, if there's even a slight change to the input, the output is going to be completely different. Okay, so I'll explain hashing in more detail because I have a slide coming up on that, so I'll still park it for that particular slide. But what has happened in coming back to our manager's situation, he has filed a report that says this person is only meeting expectations or does not even meet the expectations. And this report is going to be hashed. Now, what happens here is if anybody comes and tries to modify this rating, that hash value is going to be different from the original hash value. That ciphertext is going to change. The output of the cryptographic function is going to be different. This means nobody can go and falsify the records. So any critical files, any critical records, they should ideally be hashed. So if there's any modification, it will come to light. Okay, by simply comparing the output, which is the hash value. Now, what a cyber criminal or a fraudster can do is they will find out what is the original hash value. Let's say the original hash value is I'm just writing this down here, A123 and B. What he's going to do, he's going to go and change the rating back to exceeds expectations. And then he's going to make slight modifications, like add a full stop, add a dot here, add a put something in capital letter, add a couple of numbers here and there, so on and so forth, such that when he's hashing it again through the same function, he's going to get that same hash value of 1213B. Now, guess what will happen when the reviewers, they're going to compare it, they're going to see that the hash value has not been changed. And therefore, they're going to assume the file has not been modified. There's been no corruption. This person exceeds expectations. This is corruption. This is where a hash document has been modified. No one will now say that the document was actually modified because the person was able to successfully modify the hash. Okay, this means there is an inherent weakness in that hash function, that cipher, which is what has to be avoided. This is what we call a birthday attack, ladies and gentlemen. Another attack is what we call dictionary attack. Dictionary attack is very, very simple. Suppose your password to your Gmail is welcome123. And after this, you'll know why it should not be something like welcome123. If your password is welcome123, the way in which Gmail is going to store that password in the background in their own authentication servers in the backend, they will be passing it through some sort of encryption. They will ideally be hashing the password. They'll also add some salt to it. What do I mean by hashing and salt? I'm going to explain further. And they're going to come out with an output value. This output value is something which anybody, which cyber criminals will definitely know. They know what are these output values for different commonly used passwords. So if your password is welcome123, they already know what is the hash value of your password. They can try to use that to authenticate themselves in your place to the system. Maybe not necessarily Gmail, but maybe some other kind of system. Okay, and this is exactly what a dictionary attack is. It automates the password guessing by comparing the encrypted passwords against predetermined list of possible password values. Fairly simple, obvious passwords like admin123, welcome123, user ABC, all of this, the attackers already know what are the hash values. By simply comparing it, they will know that your password is welcome123 by simply comparing the ciphertexts. That's the reason our passwords should be very unique, very complex as well. By the way, speaking of unique, complex passwords, I don't know if you're facing this like me. We are using too many applications lately, so it's getting very difficult to not reuse passwords across these different applications. So for this, what I suggest to you is use passphrases. Passphrases are better than passwords. They are more complex, but easier for you to remember, for you and me to remember. Okay. So what are passphrases? How do they work? Please look. If you're not aware, please do look them up and let's see how we can use them. And I see that we are past the time, but I'll try to speed up a little bit. I do apologize. The last one is what we call replay attack. In replay attack, we will try to completely bypass the encryption that is protecting the passwords when they are transmitted. If the encrypted password can be captured, the ciphertext of the password is now captured. And the attacker will now try to authenticate to the authentication servers by using only the ciphertext. He's not going to try to reverse engineer the algorithm. He's not going to try to capture what your plain text password is. But he'll see, I have the encrypted version of Praveen's password right here with me. Can I use this to authenticate myself to the authentication server? I'll try to do this by replaying the traffic that is flowing during the authentication process, by retransmitting the same flow of sequence of traffic that happens during a typical authentication process. I have the ciphertext of his password with me. Can I authenticate myself? That's the whole idea of replay attack. All right. So these are the different encryption-based attacks, ladies and gentlemen. Now, looking at cryptographic algorithms, there are three categories. The first one is where you don't have any keys. This is what hashing is. The second one is where you have one key, and this is called symmetric key cryptography. And the last one is where you have two keys, which is what we call asymmetric key cryptography. What do I mean by each of these? In hashing, this is the time for me to explain hashing in detail to you. You have a hash function which works only on the basis of an algorithm. There is no key provided to it. What happens in hashing is when you give it an input value, and I think I have a slide about it, this one. When you give an input value, which is for example a message, you pass it into a hash function. It is going to come out with an output which is always of the fixed length. It is always of the same length. Maybe your input is a 64 KB notepad file, or it's a 5 GB movie file, like a video that you created or something. It doesn't matter. The output is always going to have the same length. This is an important function of a hash function, of a hashing algorithm. Another important function is if there's a small change to the input, the output is going to be completely different, which means what used to be a small lowercase letter, you now change it to an uppercase letter. Your output is going to be completely different from the original value. Okay, so these are very, very important properties of hash functions. And the third most important property is it is always a one-way function, which is written over here. From the input, you can go to the output, but it is next to impossible to go from the output back to the input. It's next to impossible, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very, very important property of hash functions. Okay, going back, what if I have one key? This is what we call symmetric key cryptography or symmetric encryption. It uses one single key for encryption and decryption. How does it work? Sender will encrypt the data, send the encrypted data over to the recipient, and he will also send the key separately, hopefully, to the recipient. The recipient has the key and decrypts it. Very straightforward and simple process. So Praveen has password protected a Word document, and I've sent it over to you. And I'll also send you another message which has a password. So you will use a password and you will decrypt it. This simple process is symmetric key cryptography or symmetric encryption. Like you see, it is simple, fast, and efficient. The problem is, how can I send you my password securely? I can send you the password through a separate out-of-band method, like I send it on SMS or I send it on WhatsApp, but still, it's not unbreakable. It's not a very reliable mechanism. So in order to overcome this challenge is why we came up with asymmetric key cryptography, or the cryptography that uses two keys. What do I mean by asymmetric key cryptography? I'll try to explain that very quickly here. In asymmetric key cryptography, ladies and gentlemen, what we do is we will have something called a public and a private key pair. So there are two keys, like I said, and these keys are a public key and a private key. Both these keys, they are mathematically related to each other, which is what I've written over here. These two keys have some mathematical relationship with each other, which means you can derive one from the other using a mathematical formula. What will happen is anybody can encrypt a file with the public key. The public key is public, which means anybody can see it, anybody can encrypt it. So the encryption function, you can do it using this public key. But in order to decrypt it, you can't do it with the public key. You will need the private key, because a private key will be shared only with the authorized recipients. Only those people who have that secret private key, they can decrypt it. Let's see how this works. The sender, Jake, creates a public and private key pair. And he's going to now send the public key to Anne. Anybody can see the public key. If an attacker is going to see this, it's totally fine. Now he's going to, what's going to happen is Anne is going to encrypt her message with the public key, and she's going to send it back to Jake. Now, like we saw earlier, Jake already has created the public and private key pair. He published only the public key, but he didn't publish the private key. The private key never left his room. It is still sitting on his computer. Since she has encrypted, this lady Anne has encrypted the file with the public key and sent it back to Jake, he's going to now use his private key and decrypt it. Nobody can decrypt the file with the public key, like I said earlier. Only the person with the private key, and the private key never left the house of Mr. Jake right here. So he'll use the private key and decrypt it. Okay, there are several examples, ladies and gentlemen, of symmetric and asymmetric key cryptography. So symmetric ones are AES, DES, Twofish, Blowfish, etc. Asymmetric include Diffie-Hellman, ECC, and so on. This is elliptic curve cryptography, by the way. Okay, so you will read more about these different algorithms as well in your textbook. Of course, I won't be able to cover them in this short training. And by the way, one of the most popular symmetric key cryptographies is DES. DES has several modes, okay, and you will see a lot of information on your textbook pertaining to these different modes when you study about them. So what I've done on this slide is I've tried to capture these different modes. Please take a snapshot of this if you like, because this will definitely help you when you're reading about it in your textbook, this particular tabular column. Take a snapshot or refer to it from the recording on our YouTube channel. Okay. Hashing as well I have covered. And one more point I need to mention is salting the hash. What do I mean by salt? If you remember on one of the earlier slides, I told you about I told you about key streams. A key stream generator is going to keep generating a series of random ones and zeros. You will simply XOR that with your input, your plain text, in order to increase the randomness of your plain text. By doing so, you're going to make it more and more difficult for someone to reverse engineer your algorithm and try to predict what the input is by looking at the output. Okay, that randomness, when you're doing the same, key stream generation or something which is on the same lines, when you do the same thing for hashing, we call it salt. What am I trying to do here? So you remember, ladies and gentlemen, I told you this birthday attack where the person, the fraudster, is trying to modify the input such that he can get the output, the same output which was originally there in the first place. So I have a file which says the earth is round, and this person is now going to come and change it to the earth is flat, and he simply makes minor changes here and there, like a lowercase letter becomes an uppercase letter, and add a full stop here, a punctuation there, and so on. He tries to modulate it such that the output hash value is still the same. If he's able to do this successfully, that means that algorithm is weak. First of all, it needs to be strengthened. And secondly, the whole process should be made more complex by doing something called salting, adding salt. So what salt does is the same message is going to be combined with a random series of ones and zeros, just like how we saw earlier in block ciphers. The message is going to be combined with different random series of ones and zeros, which is what we call the salt, and then it is going to be hashed. So there's another additional layer of complexity which is added to make it more difficult for people to arrive at the same hash when you're having two inputs for the same hash function. So first time my input is the earth is round. When it gets salted, it's going to be completely different from this. And then it is going to be hashed. So an additional level of complexity. Okay. Now, one of the best practices when you're storing passwords in the background, ladies and gentlemen, of your database servers, they should always be hashed. So when a criminal gets access to these databases, they still don't know what the passwords are. You remember hashing is a one-way function. One of the three properties of a hash function, it's a one-way function. In order to make it more difficult, by the way, to add an additional layer of complexity, salt the passwords, add a layer of salt to the passwords, and then hash them. It'll be next to impossible for someone to identify what the password is from here. Okay. Initialization vectors are the same as salt, ladies and gentlemen, a string of bits used with block or stream symmetric ciphers, and it's a method of salting your encryption algorithms, used to reduce the likelihood that the same ciphertext is going to come out from the same clear text. Okay. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming over to the last topic that I wanted to discuss today, which is what we call public key infrastructure, or PKI as we call it. Now, what is PKI? When you look at it, when in your textbook, you'll see PKI is defined as a framework. It is not a tool, it is not a solution. Rather, it's a framework that seeks to create a web of trust. Okay, it tries to create a network where different individuals can talk to each other, they can share information to each other on the principles of trust. And this trust is going to be established cryptographically, using cryptographic principles, cryptographic methodologies. A PKI system consists of several entities, which I'll explain to you on the next slide. We have something called a certificate authority, and there is within the CA, we have root CA, we have subordinate CAs, and so on. And then we have different entities who are seeking to communicate on this particular web of trust. These different entities will have something called a digitally signed certificate. What is all this? I'll explain this to you very, very quickly. The main objectives of PKI, you remember the objectives of cryptography that we started with in this particular training. PKI is going to help you to achieve those objectives. It is going to achieve confidentiality, integrity, and also non-repudiation between messages. Okay, do not confuse PKI with public key cryptography, ladies and gentlemen. You'll read the same sentence when you go through your textbook. Public key cryptography is nothing but asymmetric cryptography that we spoke about. It's completely different from PKI. Okay, where we have two keys, if you remember right. So that's different from PKI. PKI is a larger subset, a larger ecosystem, and public key cryptography is just one subset or one unit within that. Now, what are the different components within a PKI ecosystem? We have digital certificates. These are nothing but cryptographically built units which are awarded to different entities in order to verify, in order to demonstrate their identity. If I have a digital certificate, it is an authentic proof that I am who I claim to be. It is a proof that Praveen is whom he claims to be, for example. Now, these certificates are issued by certificate authorities, certification authorities. We also have someone called a registration authority. Okay, so the CA is going to issue the certificates, and the registration authority doesn't really issue certificates, but it acts as a middleman, between the certificate authority and the different entities on the PKI ecosystem. There is also a certificate management system and a database of different certificates and repositories. So if at all you want to verify the authenticity of a certificate, the certificate repository database is going to be invoked. Okay, now how does the whole process work in a PKI ecosystem? Let's assume that Jake and Anne, again, are two individuals that we had created earlier. They need to now communicate with each other. And they need to, first of all, prove their identities before they start exchanging confidential messages. Jake needs to trust Anne, Anne needs to trust Jake. So how does the process work? First of all, Jake is going to ask the certificate authority to issue a digital certificate. Now, these certificate authorities, ladies and gentlemen, you will find them when, for example, you visit, and this is in relation to the same point that one of our delegates asked us today. If the website is already signed through a digital certificate, is using, for example, TLS, can we be sure that the passwords are secure? You do have specific levels of reasonable levels of assurance in these particular scenarios. The communication between you and a server is now running through an encrypted channel is something that you can be assured of by simply clicking on the lock symbol on the top left of your browser when, for example, you're visiting www.gmail.com. So if I can show you on my browser. Okay. So you see this lock symbol over here. This is where you're seeing that the connection is secure and that there is a certificate. This is my digital certificate. And it says that it is issued by GTS-CA101. I invite you to dig deeper, go through these details. I'm not going to do that today for lack of time on this training, but go through the details and you'll see the same terminologies that I'm talking about over here. You'll see the certificate authority, who has issued this digital certificate, and so on. Now, how this works is, Jake is going to ask the certificate authority, please give me a digital certificate. Now, this certificate authority is going to verify the identity of Jake through the registration authority that we saw on the earlier slide. The RA, I said earlier, it is a middleman between the CA and the people who are trying to communicate. So the RA will come over here. Okay. So his identity now will be verified by the RA, and they will confirm this over to the CA. Based on this confirmation, the CA is going to give Mr. Jake a certificate. Hey, Mr. Jake, here's your certificate. And this is usually using the protocol X.509 version 3. Now, Jake is going to say, I've got a certificate, and he's going to share it with Miss Anne over here. And she has no idea who Jake is, but she has his certificate. What she will do is she will share this certificate over to the certificate authority. The CA will check the certificate and say, yes, this is valid and this is coming from Mr. Jake. So you can now trust him. Accordingly, Anne now trusts Jake, and she knows that she's speaking to the right entity, and she's going to start exchanging messages with this person. This is the way in which this web of trust, this ecosystem is created and is supposed to be maintained. Now, what is very important? Who are these certificate authorities? Who is going to give them the right to become a CA? This is where the most important thing lies. This is the reason, in order to become certificate authorities, there are several protocols and procedures to be followed. Okay, so usually you will see companies like VeriSign and so on. These are the companies who are giving this, who are the popular certificate authorities. There are several such companies. Please do make the time to read about these as well. Okay. All right. So that was it, ladies and gentlemen, the different points that I wanted to cover today. I know it was a little over time, but the reason is that there are so many topics in this particular subject, which is cryptography. I hope this was useful for you. And I again remind you, please try to read about the module tonight when you find some time. Or there's a lot of material on YouTube as well. Please try to top up this training with the YouTube material. With this, I open the floor for any questions. If you have, please share your questions, share your thoughts, comments, anything with me, please. Okay. So no questions. That's a little disappointing, honestly, because this is a difficult module. But then let me remind you, my contact information, the team's contact information, we are available at cyber.meeta at ingrammicro.com. So please write to us. And yes, there is some questions, some chat messages. Where can I book the training? So Mr. Ahmed Atari, thank you, sir, for this question. If you want to do any training with us, let me remind you, I'm the primary person who's running the trainings here from cybersecurity perspective. Just please write to me. My email ID is over here, praveen.kyle@ingrammicro. Please write to me, and I'm more than happy to support you on your training requirements. I'll be the person who's giving the training most likely, but I have a team as well, a team of trainers. Depending upon specific topics that you want, we will be able to support you. So please let me know about your requirements. I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Where can we get the book, sir? So the book, if you go to ISC Square, they recommend many textbooks on the website for CISSP, like the official textbooks. So there's the ISC Square official textbook, and then there's a textbook from Cybex as well, which is highly recommended. Cybex, I think the latest is 8th edition. So these are like 80 dirhams for each book, and these are very, very good books. If you are able to get them on Amazon, I really do recommend. Not only for sitting for the exam, just to refer, like as part of your on-the-job requirements. I have a question to do. I gave the exam 8 years back, but I still have these textbooks with me, and they still do help me to carry out my job. So it is recommended. Buy the book if you like, from like the hard copy book from Amazon. It's I would mention the names here. So we have Cybex CISSP, and also ISC Square official textbook for CISSP. I can also give you the names of the books after the training. The exact names I can put them down here. Okay, and there's also a hand raised, Mohammed El Kwareni. Yes, sir. If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, so I answered your question, I believe. Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Mohammed Musa, if I recommend any book, yes, sir. So for me, I would recommend the Cybex textbook. This is my personal opinion because I found the book was easy to read. And also it covered everything. Like like I said, the material is very heavy, so you don't want a book which is going to be difficult for us to read or which is tiring for us to read. So Cybex's book, I found it was easy to read, and I could go through the different modules. If I had one complaint, I found it wasn't diving as deep as how Sean Harris used to do in the early books. Sean Harris was very good that way, but Cybex is one of the best in my opinion. Yes. Exam voucher price, yes, sir. So the exam for CSSP costs 699 USD. Now, if you are interested in attending sitting the exam, you want to go for a full-fledged training. Let me remind you, I'm here as part of Ingram Micro Cybersecurity, giving the CISSP training since the last 4+ years, and I've delivered the training handheld several professionals in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia as well, to deliver to sit for the exams. So if you want to take this discussion further, just let me know. I can have a special training done only for you or for your colleagues as well with you, the way you like it. I can get something done for you. It's a 5-day training, and it is pretty intensive, yes, but it is very focused. Like those 5 days, we sit and do something like a boot camp covering the entire CSSP material. So do let me know if you want to have that. I can arrange something for you. But like I said, the exam voucher is $699. This is from ISC Square, not from me. You'll have to get it on the ISC Square website, or if you go for the training with us, I will include everything in the training for you. Any other questions or comments, anything, please let me know, sirs and ma'ams, ladies and gentlemen. We are always here. If not, okay, so if not, this recording will be out there on YouTube, and I hope the session was useful for you. I know I didn't go, I mean, this training is not going to make you exam ready, but I really hope it'll inspire you to take your next steps towards CISSP. Now, there's also a question about training details. So I'm going to drop the CISSP voucher onto this particular chat. I have a CISSP leaflet. I'll put this onto this chat. Just give me a second. Okay, I'm sorry I took a minute. Just found the file, which is the CISSP leaflet, and I put it here in the chat. So please check the leaflet. I'm just sending it over to you now. And if you want to take this further, you want to have a more focused approach on your CISSP journey, feel free to write to me. Feel free to contact me. I've given you my email ID. And the Ingram Micro YouTube channel, just type Ingram Micro Cybersecurity on YouTube. When you type these 4 words, you'll get our channel and all the previous sessions that we've delivered. I think there's 50+ videos of different topics. You'll find them over there. Please feel free to type them to check them out. Okay, I'm also conducting a CISSP session, ladies and gentlemen, in February. So you will receive the invitation for this. I'm finalizing the invitation. It's going to be in February, the second half. If you wish to join us in this particular session, that'll be amazing. That'll be really great as well. Okay, so with this great note, I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was amazing giving a session for you. And I hope that I've inspired you to move on to your next steps for CISSP on your CISSP journey. Thank you so much. And on behalf of everybody here at Ingram Micro Cybersecurity, I wish you an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Thank you all.